What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Camera Department podcast. I'm your host, Taz, and in today's episode, I just want to take you through my story so you guys can, get to know me a little bit better and basically find out how I went from shooting with a Samsung NX3000, which is like this Samsung camera's like, what? All the way up to shooting with now a red v-raptor 8K VistaVision camera, and the process of me getting from point A to point B, and like how'd that even happen? And honestly, excuse me, my wife Yami, she looks over and asks me, like, when I'm talking about a shoot or when I'm talking about something that I'm working on, or like something about a camera, and she's like, how did you get here? How did you learn this? And I really don't have an answer for her. It's like, I don't know. I just like picked it up along the way, and it's just how it is. So I want to take you guys through literally the very first time I picked up a camera, I guess for camera purposes, not just like, when I'm like 5 years old. Like, I'm not just, I'm not going back that far. Recent history. I'm going to start in 2014 and then go all the way up to, I guess, present day. So, excuse me, I'm battling a little bit of a chest thing, cough thing. Went to the doctor, got it checked out. It's nothing, but I am on cough medicine to try and get rid of it. But you can probably hear it in my voice, and I'll probably have to clear my throat a little bit throughout this podcast. But let's just get started. So back in 2014, I had moved to New York City, and a little bit even more backstory. I went to school for exercise science and kinesiology and biomechanics, and learn human movement. Really, like, I thought I wanted to be a top tier strength and conditioning coach. So I had moved down to New York City to pursue personal training at Equinox. I'm originally from the Northeast, up in New Hampshire, and went to school in Maine at the University of New England, where I studied applied exercise science. And so, I thought I wanted to be a strength coach when I was in school. Then I quickly learned how competitive that space is. So then I went to more general, like, personal training, trained for a couple years out of school up in New Hampshire, and then kind of got a little stagnant, and then moved down to New York City I figured, why not move down to like the greatest city in the world and try and advance my career? So I moved down there and end up meeting Yami, my wife, at Equinox. We were both starting to work there at the same exact time. She had a boyfriend at the time. I promise, I'm not a homewrecker. I stayed in my lane, but they were already, I guess, 1 foot out the door at that point. So nothing strictly platonic, like very early on. There was nothing really going on. But fast forward, we end up getting together, we end up dating. And she asked me, back up. No, she starts a YouTube channel, and she asked me, what camera do you think I should buy? And little did I know that question just sparked something in me. So I started researching cameras. She was like, okay, I'm going to start vlogging. I'm just going to start doing this thing. Because she had a already decent presence on social media, on Instagram at the time. This is back in 2014. I want to say when I met her, she had like 13,000 followers. And so she had recently started building up a following. She's like, okay, I'm going to start vlogging. I'm getting into fitness now. Because she was previously working in field marketing for Muscle Milk and Red Bull, and she went to school for hospitality management, and so she was working in marketing for Muscle Milk at the time. And so she left that job to go work at Equinox. That's where we met. So she started YouTubing, and she asked me, what camera should I buy? She started vlogging on her phone and on her iPad. So she asked me what camera she should buy. I started doing a really, really deep dive into cameras and just comparing all these different cameras. Okay, what's the best camera to vlog with? Okay, well, these are the top 3. Okay, let me compare this one to this one, and then camera 1 to camera 2, and then camera 1 to camera 3, and then camera 3 to camera 2, and then camera 3. All this, I started comparing all of them and really doing a really deep dive into cameras and how they work and what makes them good. And as I was researching, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Cameras are pretty neat. I still wasn't fully fledged into like photography or anything. I was still training, but something started spinning in my head. So fast forward a few months, I start vlogging. I buy this Samsung NX3000. I think it was, I'm looking, it's up on my computer right now. I can see it. I'm pretty sure that's the camera. I can't honestly even remember. They don't even make it anymore. I don't remember what lens mount it was, because it's an interchangeable lens camera, but I have no idea what lens a Samsung camera would use. So turns out that camera was, decent for what it did, but it was pretty bad in the grand scheme of things. So used that camera for a little while. I started vlogging as well, a little bit more. I was like, okay, well, I need something a little bit more robust. And so I graduated, I think, to a Sony a5000. And I used that for a little while. I can't remember. I think that one was an interchangeable lens as well, but I still really didn't know a whole lot about, okay, what made a lens a lens? I was shooting on auto, so I really didn't even learn how to properly expose on manual until I was like, okay, well, I need to. I was watching fitness YouTube, and I was watching these creators, create some pretty cool like workout edits, and that's really what was like, wow, that's so cool, all the slow mo and the editing and all the effects that are happening, and that was the first time I think I had really seen a fairly high production value outside of like a movie. So there was like care taken into the shots that were gotten, and the speed ramping and all this stuff that made it visually interesting. And so that was really interesting to me. And I realized like my camera, it didn't do slow-mo. So I was only filming, I think it was 24 frames or 30 frames. I can't even remember. This was so long ago. And then after that, we were in New York for a few years, and we ended up moving back to New Hampshire, where I'm originally from. So I drug Yami with me back to New Hampshire, because we were just broke at the time. And so we moved back to New Hampshire and lived there for a few years. I didn't really do a ton with photography and videography there. It was more so I was just vlogging, kind of doing my own thing, learning a little bit more about exposure, learning more about like how to really use my camera well. And then fast forward a little bit further, we ended up moving to Houston. So we moved to Houston in February 2018. We're still here in Houston, and from there, we joined a church, and I start to be surrounded by more like I joined the creative dream team at church. And then I was just surrounded by like all these people that were so good at photography and like really good at video and had all this stuff. They had gimbals, and there were drones, and they were just like these people that were volunteering, and then just like volunteering their time and their gear and their resources just to like help pour in to the church and help create really, really cool stuff for church. And so that was the first time I was really exposed to, I guess, a higher level of production. And then from there, shortly after that, I got hired on at church in January 2020. And we all know what happened 3 months later in 2020. COVID hit. So I was basically the only filmmaker on the team, like full-time filmmaker. We had our creative director, we had our like associate creative director who was good with film as well, but he had so much other stuff going on that he was like a part-time filmmaker. He would fill in and he would help out where he could, but I was like the only full-time like film guy. And so it was like I really, really learned a lot from there. So we started I started in January, March hits, COVID, church goes completely online. From there, I would say in that 8 months from I think it was March 2020 to October or November of 2020, where we were filming church in a hotel room. It was a very, very nice hotel room. It had a wall of windows, and I was like, great, this is going to be an awesome spot. But little did I know that how challenging it would be to film there. And I do want to say there was one one guy who's in Houston. He's a Houston local and really, really big name in the Houston film world is Dan Rubottom. And he came alongside our team and really helped us. He poured into us so much. And like I said, in that 8 months, I learned more shooting in that environment than I did the previous, let's just say, what was that, 2020, from 2014 all the way to 2020, that's 6 years of like kind of dabbling and learning a little bit here and there. In the 8 months of 2020 during COVID, I learned more in that than I did the previous 6 years of like kind of having, camera in my hands. So Dan, I'm not sure if you're going to listen to this, but thank you so much for everything you did for our team, because it was basically our production team who were just used to producing church in like an auditorium, in a gymnasium. So we had no idea what we were doing when it came to making sure it was exposed properly. And we had all this natural light coming in, which again, I thought, oh, this is going to be great, but so challenging because if you have all that light flooding in, if the clouds come in, then your image completely changes. If it's rainy one day or if it's sunny one day, you can imagine like how different it is. And like, in your house, like if it's cloudy and if it's rainy one day, how dark it is in your house. And if it's sunny and you have all this light coming in, then it's bright and it changes so much. And that change is exacerbated on camera so much more just because cameras are not as sophisticated as the human eye. And the image that you capture changes so much regarding like dependent on your environment. So I learned about like, oh, you can put an ND filter on a window and make sure like there's not as much light coming in. So then one, you can actually expose the cameras properly. You can see out the window, but you're not dealing with it with as much natural light coming in. That means you have more control over how your subject looks and how your overall image looks. And it makes it so much easier when you're color grading. And I mean, don't even get me into color grading because I learned so much in terms of color correction, making sure you're capturing in a manner that makes the post-production process easier. So learned a lot about color grading and getting your footage back to a baseline before you can even like grade it. And I thought just like color grading was one big ball. And it's really like this meticulous process of, okay, you're making sure your exposures where it needs to be, all your cameras match, because we were running 4, sometimes 5 cameras in a multicam setting, and you had to make sure all your cameras matched before you could, really move forward. So Dan really taught us the intricacies of exposure, of white balance, of making sure like, okay, yeah, like one click on the ISO really does matter in, making sure all your images look the same coming out of your cameras. And not even to mention, we were using different cameras. So we were using a couple of Varicams and then we were using EVA 1s. And that was the first time I had really been like, whoa, I jumped from basically a Lumix S1, which is what we had at church on the film team. This was in 2020. And then using these big production cameras. It's the first time I'd really been exposed to production cameras. And that's when I really learned a lot. It was like, wow, these cameras can do so much. This is incredible. And the more I learned in that environment, the more I was like, oh, wow, there's so many different types of cameras out there for different use cases, and started learning the intricacies of what all these different cameras do. So I've used, Lumix for a long, long time. I'm shooting on Lumix GH5 right now. I used the GH4 for a little while before church. I didn't own one, but I got my hands on one, GH5 that Yami purchased. Then the Lumix S1 and the S1H. So I'm just kind of giving you a timeline of like the cameras that I've had over the years. So it was, let's go back to the very beginning, the Samsung NX3000, I believe it was. Then it was the Sony A5000. I think in there I graduated to the Sony A5300 just for a little while. And then I think or maybe it's the A6000. I can't remember. There were so many that like released back in that time. And then after that, I used a Lumix G9 for some like little vlogging stuff for a YouTuber here in Houston, and then the Lumix S1 for some. I did really kind of skip over a lot of this. So I worked for a YouTuber for a few months. Here in Houston, helping them film and edit some of their stuff, and then after that, I went to real estate photo and video. So I was using a Lumix S1 with a wide-angle lens, and it was a great camera. And then after that, from real estate photo and video, I went to church. January 2020, we had a Lumix. I had a Lumix S1 there. And then we got the Lumix S1Hs, which were like really, really robust mirrorless cinema cameras, which were like, they were great. They helped us accomplish a lot of awesome stuff. And then post COVID, I was like, okay, we, as the film team here, we realized how important video is. We need to, like, COVID really opened our eyes. And I think it opened a lot of people's eyes to how truly important like video content is, because everything went online, people weren't in person, and how important it is to have like high quality video. I'm not just talking in like the church world, I'm talking in general for any business and anybody trying to run a business, excuse me. In this day and age, video is so important. And so I was like, okay, we if we're going to be a film team, we need like film cinema cameras. Enter the Red Komodo. And that's where like my world changed. So I was slightly introduced to Red, I want to say late 2019, when I still wasn't on staff at church, but I was still volunteering. I had a chance to be a part of a shoot, and they brought in a contractor who was shooting on a Red Gemini or a Dragon. Might have been a Dragon. I can't remember exactly. It was one of the DSMC2. His name was Toby Canning, and he came on set with this Red. I was like, whoa, I've heard about Red cameras, but I've never seen one in person, and it's so cool. And just seeing the production with the Red and how, like, what it looked like afterward, I was like, wow, like that, it looks like a movie. I can see why movies are shot on this type of camera, this type of like the Reds. And so that's like, that got really wet my whistle when it came to seeing what Reds could do. So the Reds were always in the back of my head. And fast forward to when we got out of COVID, I want to say it was early 2021, maybe late 2020, where I put in a purchase request to purchase request. Did I say that? Purchase request. Yeah. I have no idea what I'm saying anymore. Put in a request to purchase, I think two Red Komodos. And they granted my request, and we got those Komodos. And that's really when I fell in love with like the Red workflow. The image that comes out of those cameras is just incredible. You have your 16-bit compressed RAW, which is smaller than the equivalent ProRes file, and you're getting full Red, like R3D, or I just call it Red RAW footage. And it just opened my eyes to like, wow, you have all this control. You can do all of this. And this is coming out of like COVID, where I learned so much about how to properly use a camera. And so that just like really took off. We started using Reds, and then Red announced the v-raptor, and I was like, that's it right there. I would love to have that camera. So I want to say that was 2022 at some point that they announced the v-raptor. Don't quote me on that. And so we were still shooting with the Komodos on like stories of life change at church and testimonials, and we were shooting recap videos, and it was just so great because the more I got to use that footage, the more I really dove into how much I could edit the footage and really push it around, and how I could grade it to make it look a certain way. And then that challenged my lighting even more. So like knowing, okay, well, if I can get this image with like what I did here, what if I really focus on lighting it differently next time and lighting it better? And what will this camera give me if I give it better lighting? And then I started diving more into lenses and how much the lens affects your image. And I had an opportunity to be on DP a handful of our shoots for what's called At the Movies. So it's a series that a lot of churches do, and basically they take like real like blockbuster Hollywood films, like we did Ford versus Ferrari one year, we did Greyhound one year, we did Hacksaw Ridge, we do like these big movies, and basically what happens is they pull storylines out of it, and they pull biblical truths out of the storyline, whether it could be a number of things. But basically you take the movie, you chop it up, you take like a 2-hour movie and you chop it down to like 30 minutes, and then you have different scenes. And so you have your scenes, and then you have your pastor preaching in between each of those scenes, kind of recapping what happened, but then pulling biblical truths like parables, just like Jesus would do in the Bible, pull out stories and use that story to illustrate a biblical truth. And what we would do is we would bring in, when we were shooting the pastor scenes, the speaking scenes, we would bring in a full-on, basically like a movie set. We would bring in a full set designer, set decorator. We would have like a really, really high production movie set basically going on. We would bring in lighting and gaff and grip and electric, and a bunch of our staff from church would be on set. So they'd be PAs and they'd be helping with grip as well. And I started off doing that as just kind of like, I was on set, I was just watching. The very first one was 2020, I want to say end of 2020, where we were filming that. And I was just on set, just almost observing a little more. I was helping with grip. I think Dan was actually DPing that, and I was on his hip. I was like, okay, well, what are you looking for here, and how do you approach this, and okay, well, what's that one doing, and what do all these lights do? And he was just like really pouring into me again, not just in that hotel with filming for COVID, but on this set for At the Movies. And again, another huge learning experience with the intricacies of creating a really, really good looking image. So had the chance to observe and help him. And then fast forward, I'm now doing it myself, and I am now the DP of those. So it's such a great opportunity. It's always so fun because we're working with the movie, and I'm cutting the movie down to be have the scenes work. And then I'm also working with the set decorators and lighting, to drawing up lighting plots based on what the background's going to look like. And now we're getting to like virtual production, and we're shooting on an LED wall, which really minimizes the need for flipping a full set, because previously, up until, I want to say the first time we shot on the LED wall was 2022. And up until that point, we would bring the full set. So it would be a physical set. We bring in a set designer, they build everything. And then, so now shooting on an LED, it just minimizes the need for that, and it speeds up our workflow quite a bit. And you can put anything on the LED. So based on what's on the LED now, we're lighting it, and we're bringing in foreground elements to make it feel a little more immersive. So all that to say, some amazing learning experiences there. And I will say that the church is one of it's got to be the best place to learn for somebody who's just starting, because I'm not going to say a ton of churches, but there are churches that have been resourced really, really well. And they have this equipment that you can use. Like, where else can you go? I was handling a Varicam with a $30,000 lens on it. So where else can you go handle a $45,000 camera and be allowed to use it? You're not going to get that opportunity on just like any other film set. So church was such an instrumental part in me learning and growing, and it still is. It still is. I get so many opportunities to work with churches and help them produce video, and it's always something different. And that's the beautiful thing. It's always something different. It's not always going to be the same. There's always going to be different challenges, and so I can firmly say and confidently say that church was instrumental in me getting to where I am today. And I'm so grateful for all the experiences that I've had in every church, and specifically where I really started at Hope City in Houston. And it's just been such a crazy ride. So fast forward to, I think it was September 2023. I had, up until like from previously when we bought those Reds, I've been learning about Red. I've been keeping up with like what they're doing and their philosophy, and really like learning about them. And I had the dream, as I mentioned a little while ago, the v-raptor, like that camera is just next level. And so there came an opportunity in late 2023 where I was able to purchase my own, and now I have my own v-raptor. It's Yami's filming with it right now in the other room, and it's just been so great. So that's kind of the story of like where I started and to like where I am now, and it's just been such a blessing to have had all those experiences and the route that I've taken and gone to get where I am right now. And I'm definitely not finished by any means. I'm not finished. I haven't arrived. I am not the most forefront authority in film by any means. So I am always looking to like learn and grow. And I'm hoping to really bring on some amazing friends now, and people that are doing things better than me and at a higher level than me. And so one, I can continue and learn and to learn and grow from them. And hopefully you guys can learn and grow from them as well. So yeah, that's, I think that's everything. I don't think I missed much of anything, but if I did, maybe it'll come up in a future podcast. Like, oh yeah, that's part of my story too. And oh yeah, maybe that is, but I can't think of anything right now. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of me just breaking down my story of how I started shooting with some random Samsung camera all the way up to now being a Red v-raptor AK owner. So thank you guys so much for listening. Drop your comments below, and I will see you guys in the next one.